Beloved chosen one, stop for a moment. Do not scroll. Do not rush past this breath. Heaven has pressed pause on the noise around you because this moment was designed to collide with your spirit. You are not here by accident. You are not listening by coincidence. You were interrupted because God Himself has been watching you walk under weight that was never meant to crush you. And today, He speaks while the heavens lean close. You have felt it lately, that strange stillness, the slowing down, the delays that make no sense, doors that did not slam shut, but quietly refused to open. You thought it was confusion. You assumed it was fatigue, but in truth, it was restraint. God stopped you because if you had kept moving at that speed, you would have outrun His protection. Heaven paused you because what comes next requires alignment, not momentum. You are different. You have always been. Even as a child, you sensed you did not fit cleanly into the patterns around you. You carried depth while others skimmed the surface. You felt conviction where others felt comfort. And because of that, life pressed harder on you. You were misunderstood, overlooked, sometimes even rejected, not because you were weak, but because your spirit carried weight. Darkness recognizes authority before humans do. Listen carefully now. God is not angry with you. He is not disappointed in your questions. He is not shocked by your exhaustion. What breaks His heart is that you almost believed the lie that your endurance was invisible. He saw every night you cried silently. He saw every time you chose restraint instead of reaction. He saw the moments you wanted to quit but whispered, "I'll keep going anyway." That is why heaven paused. That is why this message found you. This is not urgency born from fear. This is urgency born from mercy. There is a narrow window where instruction matters more than effort. You do not need to run faster. You need to listen deeper, because if you move without clarity, you will misinterpret the season, and this season is sacred. Chosen one, God is weeping not because He is powerless, but because He is compassionate. His tears are not weakness, they are evidence of intimacy. He is close enough to feel what you feel, and He is close enough to redirect you before loss becomes permanent. This is divine intervention, not algorithmic chance. You have been carrying guilt that was never yours. You blamed yourself for outcomes that were orchestrated to train discernment. You internalized delay as failure, when delay was protection. Had you received what you asked for too early, it would have consumed you. God withheld not to punish you, but to preserve you. Right now, something in your spirit is tightening. That is conviction, not condemnation. Conviction is a gift. It means the door is still open. It means you are still seen. But hear this clearly. Conviction ignored hardens into distance. This is why heaven paused you today. There is a decision approaching. Not tomorrow, not someday. A quiet internal decision where you either align or you drift. Drift is subtle. Drift feels harmless. Drift sounds like later. But later has stolen more destinies than rebellion ever did. Do not do it. No matter the price. No matter You are standing at a crossroads that looks ordinary on the surface. No thunder, no angels in the sky. Just a nudge, a pull, a knowing. That is how God often speaks to His chosen ones, soft enough to require obedience, clear enough to remove excuse. Remember, you were never called to blend in. You were called to stand. And standing costs something. It costs comfort. It costs approval. It costs delay gratification, but it gives you authority. And authority is what darkness fears most. We are reminded through the writings of David in the Psalms, chapter 46, verse 10. Be still, and know that I am God. Stillness is not inactivity. Stillness is surrender. Stillness is trust. Stillness is the battlefield where God fights for you while you resist the urge to interfere. This is why heaven paused you, not to shame you, not to scare you, but to remind you who leads, but you are not behind. You are being positioned, and what comes next will require obedience sharper than your emotion. Before you move forward, seal this moment. If this message reached you, do not dismiss it. Engage it. Support the work that brings these words to the ones who need them. Like this message. Share it with someone who feels forgotten. Subscribe so you stay aligned with what God is releasing next. And as a prophetic act of agreement, comment 77 below. Not as a ritual, but as a declaration that you hear, you are still, and you are willing to obey. You begin to understand something deeper now. God's tears are not new. They have history, long before your private grief, before your silent endurance. Heaven recorded the weeping of a man who carried God's heart so closely that his tears became prophecy. His name was Jeremiah. Jeremiah was not chosen because he was strong in speech or fearless in temperament. He was chosen because he was sensitive enough to feel what others ignored. From the beginning, his calling came wrapped in warning, not applause. God showed him nations falling, hearts hardening, and judgment approaching, and then asked him to speak anyway. You recognize this weight. To know truth before others are ready is a lonely assignment. They called Jeremiah the prophet of doom. They mocked him, rejected him, imprisoned him, accused him of betrayal. Yet none of that broke him as deeply as watching people refuse mercy while it was still available. Jeremiah did not weep for himself. He wept for them. He wept because he could see what stubbornness would cost, and he could not stop it. You see yourself here, not as a prophet in robes, but as a soul who feels deeply, who warns gently, who loves fiercely, and who suffers quietly when no one listens. You are not weak for this. You are wired this way because God entrusts his sorrow only to those who will not cheapen it. Jeremiah stood between heaven and a rebellious nation, pleading for repentance while knowing judgment was near. He preached while being ignored. He prayed while being ridiculed. He obeyed while being broken. This is why his tears mattered. They were not emotional overflow, they were intercession. There were moments Jeremiah wanted to stop. He confessed that the word of God felt like fire shut up in his bones, painful to contain yet impossible to silence. This is what happens when calling collides with compassion. You feel pressure inside because you were never meant to carry truth passively, but carrying it actively costs you sleep, peace, and sometimes relationships. And still, Jeremiah stayed. He did not numb himself. He did not harden his heart. He allowed himself to feel what God felt. This is rare. Most people protect themselves from grief by distancing themselves from responsibility. Chosen ones do the opposite. They draw closer, even when it hurts. There is a moment recorded where Jeremiah cries out, wishing his head were waters and his eyes a fountain of tears. Not because of his own suffering, but because of the spiritual blindness of the people. He knew destruction was coming, and mercy was being refused. This is not despair, this is love at its most painful depth. You have tasted this kind of sorrow. When you warned someone gently and they laughed. When you felt prompted to speak but were told you were too intense. When you watched patterns repeat and consequences stack up, knowing it did not have to end that way. You grieved not because you were right, but because you cared. After Jerusalem fell, Jeremiah did not celebrate being correct. He wrote Lamentations. 5 chapters of raw grief, no resolution, no triumph, just mourning. Scripture did not censor his pain. God preserved it. That tells you something important. God does not ask his chosen ones to suppress sorrow. He sanctifies it. Through the prophet Jeremiah, recorded in the book bearing his name, chapter 9, verse 1. Oh, that my head were waters, and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. This is not weakness. This is alignment. When your heart breaks over what breaks God's heart, you are standing in holy ground. You may have wondered why you feel things more deeply than others, why injustice troubles you longer, why compromise unsettles you, why silence feels heavier than confrontation. It is because, like Jeremiah, you were built to feel before you were built to act. Feeling is not your flaw, and it is your assignment. Jeremiah's life teaches you something sobering but necessary. Obedience does not always change outcomes immediately. Sometimes it only proves faithfulness, and faithfulness matters even when results do not validate it. Heaven measures differently than crowds do. God never rebuked Jeremiah for his tears. He rebuked the people for ignoring them. That means your grief has been noted. Your prayers that felt unanswered were not unheard. Your tears did not fall to the ground unnoticed. They were collected as testimony. This is why God weeps with you, not at you. He recognizes his own heart in yours. And just as Jeremiah's story did not end in silence, neither does yours. But before restoration, there is recognition. Before healing, there is honesty. Before glory, there is lament. You are not abandoned in this sorrow. You are accompanied. The same God who listened to Jeremiah's cries is listening to yours now. And just as he sustained a weeping prophet through collapse, exile, and loss, he will sustain you through what you do not yet understand. You are not fragile. You are faithful. And heaven knows the difference. You need to hear this with clarity and sobriety. Do not stay alone when you are standing near the edge. Isolation at ordinary times is tiring. Isolation at spiritual thresholds is dangerous. When pressure increases and silence grows louder, the instinct to withdraw feels natural, but it is not safe. The edge you are near is not dramatic. It is quiet. It feels like fatigue, numbness, or the thought, "I'll deal with this later." That is exactly why it matters. The most vulnerable moments of your life have not been when everything collapsed at once. They have been when no one noticed anything was wrong, when you were still functioning, still smiling, still helping others. But inside, something was fraying. Those moments are thresholds, and thresholds require witnesses. God never designed you to carry decisive moments alone. Even Jesus, on the night of greatest pressure, asked others to stay awake with him, not because they could save him, but because presence matters when obedience costs everything. If the Son of God did not isolate himself at the edge, neither should you. You are not weak for needing others. You are wise for recognizing limits. Darkness does not usually attack head-on. It waits until you are tired, quiet, and convinced you should not bother anyone. It whispers that your struggle is too small to mention or too heavy to explain. Both lies have the same goal: silence. When you isolate at the edge, your thoughts begin to echo without correction. Fear sounds like logic. Delay sounds like rest. Compromise sounds like flexibility, and slowly, the line you promised never to cross feels closer than it should. This is not because you lack faith, it is because you are human. Practical obedience here is simple, but not easy. Identify one safe voice before the pressure peaks. Not a crowd, not strangers. One person who can see you clearly enough to ask hard questions and love you enough to stay. You do not need to explain everything, Otom. You only need to refuse secrecy. Secrecy is the soil where collapse grows, not sin alone secrecy. When you hide your exhaustion, your doubt, your temptation, or your confusion, it gains power. When you speak it out loud, it loses mystique. Light does not have to argue with darkness. It only has to be present. This is not about dramatic confession. This is about timely connection. Saying, "I'm not okay." Saying, "I need prayer." Saying, "Can you check on me this week?" These are not admissions of failure. They are acts of spiritual intelligence. You may feel the urge to disappear when pressure rises. That urge is a signal, not a command. Treat it like a warning light on a dashboard. Something needs attention. Something needs support. Ignoring the light does not make the engine stronger. God built protection into community, not crowds, not applause presence. That is why so many falls happen privately. That is why restoration often begins publicly, with witnesses. You are safer when someone knows where you are standing. Scripture does not romanticize isolation. It consistently warns against it. The ancient words recorded in the book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 1. Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. This is not condemnation, and it is instruction. Sound judgment requires input. Perspective requires proximity. When you feel yourself pulling away, do the opposite of what fear suggests. Send the message. Make the call. Sit in the room even if you say nothing. Let your nervous system remember that you are not alone. The goal is not to be impressive. The goal is to be preserved. There is another practical boundary you must set. Do not make permanent decisions while emotionally flooded. The edge distorts scale. What feels unbearable today may be manageable tomorrow, but only if you delay action long enough for clarity to return. Pause is not avoidance. Pause is protection. You are allowed to rest without retreating. You are allowed to be quiet without disappearing. There is a difference. Rest keeps you connected. Retreat cuts you off. Learn to recognize which one you are choosing. If you are near a line, name it. Out loud. To God and to someone safe, lines lose power when they are defined. Vague danger feels overwhelming. Named danger can be guarded. Say, "I am close to burnout." Say, "I am close to giving up." Say, "I am close to making a choice I might regret." These sentences invite help before damage occurs. Do not spiritualize loneliness. Solitude can be holy. Isolation is not. Solitude is chosen with God. Isolation is chosen against people. One restores you, the other drains you while convincing you it is necessary. You are not meant to prove strength by suffering silently. You are meant to practice wisdom by staying connected. The edge is not where you show how tough you are. It is where you show how teachable you remain. Before you move forward, anchor this instruction with action. Not later, now. As a simple declaration of refusal to isolate, comment this phrase below. I won't isolate. This is not about visibility. It is about agreement. When you write it, you are reminding yourself that silence is not your shield. Connection is. You are choosing presence over pride, wisdom over withdrawal, life over collapse. You are not alone at the edge, and you do not have to cross it alone either. You are beginning to understand why your life could never fit neatly into ordinary patterns. The distance you felt was not punishment. The resistance you encountered was not misfortune. You were marked quietly, deliberately, and early. And when God marks someone, He does not do it for comfort, He does it for purpose. Being marked rarely feels special at first. It feels confusing. It feels like standing just outside rooms you should belong in. It feels like being tolerated rather than embraced. You sensed it in conversations that never went deep, in opportunities that almost worked but never fully aligned, in relationships that faded the moment you refused to compromise who you were. This was not rejection by chance. This was separation by design. God separates before He reveals. He hides before He elevates. What looks like isolation is often insulation. You were kept away from environments that would have diluted you before you were strong enough to resist them. You were spared from applause that would have distracted you. You were delayed so depth could form where speed would have ruined you. You asked yourself many times, "Why is this so hard for me?" The answer is not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are carrying something rare. Rare things are guarded carefully. They are not handled casually. They are protected from crowds until the right moment. You noticed that wherever you went, systems reacted to you, not because you were loud, but because you were clear. You did not accuse, yet truth felt uncomfortable in your presence. You did not compete, yet comparison followed you. This is the mark at work. Light does not have to announce itself, it simply exposes. Still, being marked comes with temptation. The temptation to harden, the temptation to withdraw completely, the temptation to believe that because you are different, you must walk alone. That is where many chosen ones stumble, not because they lacked calling, but because they misunderstood it. God never marks someone to isolate them from all counsel. He marks them so they can serve with clarity. You were not marked to be superior. You were marked to be responsible. Responsibility always feels heavier than privilege. It requires restraint. It requires humility. It requires obedience when shortcuts are available. This is why your road looked narrow while others seem to move freely. Freedom without direction eventually becomes bondage. There were moments you wanted to mute your discernment, to stop feeling so much, to stop noticing what others ignored. You tried to simplify yourself to fit spaces that were never designed for you. But every time you tried, something inside resisted. That resistance was not rebellion, it was protection. Your spirit would not allow you to betray the assignment written into you. The voice of God speaks clearly through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 43, verse 1. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. This is the foundation of the mark. You are not wandering, trying to earn belonging. You already belong. You are called by name, not by accident. Ownership precedes instruction. Identity comes before assignment. God marks what He claims. You are not overlooked. You are claimed. You are not forgotten. You are named. And what God names, He defends. That is why some attacks never finished you. That is why certain traps failed. That is why what broke others refined you instead. You were not spared pain, but you were preserved through it. The mark also explains why comparison drained you. You were measuring a hidden season against someone else's visible harvest. But heaven does not grade on the same timeline. Some are revealed early, others are fortified longer. Delay does not mean denial. Delay often means trust. God trusted you with depth before visibility. He trusted you with silence before influence. He trusted you with formation before expansion. And that trust cost you comfort, but it built capacity. Capacity is what keeps blessing from becoming destruction. If these words are resonating, it is because recognition is happening. Truth recognizes truth, and when something aligns deeply, it is worth staying connected to it. Supporting this message by liking it, sharing it, or subscribing is not about promotion. It is about partnership. It helps these words reach others who are also marked but questioning their path. There is someone near you who believes their difference is a flaw. Someone who thinks resistance means failure. Sharing this may become the confirmation they have been quietly asking God for. And staying subscribed keeps you grounded in messages that remind you who you are when pressure tries to rename you. You were never meant to vanish. You were meant to emerge whole. The mark on your life is not a burden, it is a blueprint. And now, you are mature enough to carry it without being crushed by it. Do not rush what God is unfolding. Do not envy timelines that are not yours. Do not doubt the mark just because the road was narrow. What God calls His own, He finishes shaping. What He claims, He sustains. You are still here because heaven is intentional. And what comes next will finally explain why you had to be different all along. Now you are standing at the point where everything narrows. This is the place where excuses stop working, where delay no longer feels neutral, and where choice becomes unavoidable. What you are facing is not dramatic on the outside. There is no thunder, no announcement, no public pressure. The decision is quiet, internal, and deeply personal. That is what makes it powerful. This is the moment heaven has been waiting for, not because God is unsure, but because you are being invited into agreement. Agreement changes everything. You can believe all the right things and still remain stuck if obedience is postponed. Faith without movement becomes memory. Conviction without response slowly turns into familiarity, and familiarity dulls urgency. You have felt this tension growing, a pull in one direction, a resistance in another. Part of you wants to move forward cleanly, decisively, without dragging old weights along. Another part wants to wait until it feels easier, safer, more certain. But clarity rarely comes before obedience. Most of the time, clarity follows it. Heaven is not pressuring you. Heaven is positioning you. There is a difference. Pressure rushes you out of fear. Positioning invites you through trust. God is not saying, hurry or else. He is saying, choose, because staying undecided is quietly shaping you in a direction you did not intend. This is where many people lose ground, not through rebellion, but through delay. Delay feels harmless. Delay feels wise. Delay feels like rest, but delay at the wrong moment becomes disobedience wearing a polite face. And you are discerning enough to know when waiting is faith and when it is avoidance. You are not being asked to do everything at once. You are being asked to do the next right thing. One step, one act of obedience, one honest decision. The weight lifts when movement begins. Standing still under conviction is what exhausts you. There is also something else happening here. Heaven is watching not just what you choose, but how you choose. Will you choose from fear of loss or from trust in God's character? Will you choose based on comfort or based on calling? The same decision can be made from two different spirits, and only one leads to peace. You have already outgrown some environments, habits, and thought patterns. Staying connected to them now feels heavy because grace for that season has lifted. This is not punishment. It is transition. When grace lifts, friction increases. That friction is a signal to move, not to force comfort where it no longer exists. You are not being dramatic. You are being directed. The cost of obedience is real. It may cost you familiarity. It may cost you approval. It may cost you timing that others don't understand. But the cost of disobedience is always higher. It costs clarity, intimacy, and momentum. And those losses accumulate quietly until you wonder how you drifted so far from where you intended to be. This is why heaven is direct with you now, because you are capable of responding. God does not demand from those who are unprepared. He invites those who are ready. And readiness does not mean fearlessness, it means willingness. The Spirit spoke through the prophet Elijah, as recorded in the first book of Kings at chapter 18, verse 21. How long will you waver between two opinions if the Lord is God? Follow him. This question is not accusation, it is mercy. It is God interrupting indecision before indecision hardens into identity. Wavering drains strength, decision restores it. Even a difficult yes brings more peace than a prolonged maybe. You may be afraid that choosing obedience will close doors. It will. But only doors that lead you away from what you asked God for in the first place. Obedience does not shrink your future, it refines it. It removes distractions disguised as options. And hear this clearly, God is not asking you to be perfect. He is asking you to be aligned. Alignment allows grace to flow. Misalignment forces you to strive for what grace once carried. There is something powerful about deciding inwardly before circumstances change outwardly. When you settle the matter in your heart, the environment eventually follows. Not instantly, not effortlessly, but inevitably. This is a crossing moment, quiet but real. And crossing moments deserve markers, not to impress others, but to remind yourself that you chose consciously, not passively, as a prophetic declaration of decision, not perfection, not arrival, but willingness. Comment 999 below. This number is not magic, it is a marker. It says, I refuse to waver. I choose alignment over delay. I choose obedience over comfort. Writing it anchors the moment in memory so you cannot later pretend you didn't know. You are not being rushed, you are being called forward. And once you choose, heaven moves with you. What you survived was not meant to destroy you. It was meant to define you. Only now are you beginning to understand that the fire you resented became the forge that shaped authority into your spirit. You did not emerge untouched, but you emerged intact, and that distinction matters. Untouched people carry opinions, refined people carry weight. There were seasons when it felt like everything familiar was stripped away at once. Support faded, certainty blurred. Strength failed you at the exact moment you needed it most. You wondered why God did not intervene sooner, why relief seemed delayed, why endurance was demanded beyond what felt reasonable. But fire does not rush its work. It stays until transformation is complete. You were not burned because you were weak. You were tested because you were capable of holding what comes next. Fire reveals composition. It burns away what cannot last and strengthens what can. And in that process, you learned discernment that comfort could never teach you. You learned how to stand without applause, how to obey without explanation, how to keep integrity when shortcuts were available. You learned how to wait without becoming bitter, how to suffer without becoming cruel. These are not soft skills. They are governing traits, and governing traits are forged, not taught. There were moments you felt exposed, as if every layer of protection had been removed. But exposure was not abandonment, it was training. Leaders are not formed in hiding forever. At some point, they must learn to stand without armor, relying on alignment instead of defense. You discovered limits you didn't know you had. And when you reached them, grace met you not to remove the fire, but to sustain you through it. That is how you learned the difference between strength and dependence. Strength boasts, dependence endures. You also learned who stayed. Fire clarifies relationships. Some people could not walk with you into discomfort. Others surprised you with quiet faithfulness. You stopped chasing crowds and started valuing presence. This recalibration was necessary. Authority requires discernment not just in decisions but in companionship. There were days you questioned whether the cost was worth it, whether obedience was taking more than it gave. But what you could not yet see was that the fire was depositing something irreversible inside you. Once forged, it cannot be unforged. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot return to who you were before depth was carved into you. This is why the enemy fought you hardest in the fire, not because you were failing, but because you were becoming. Becoming is dangerous to darkness. A person who has survived refinement without losing humility carries uncommon authority. They do not need to shout. Their presence speaks. You no longer react the way you once did. Certain temptations lost their pull. Certain fears lost their voice. This is not because life became easier, but because you became steadier. Fire stabilized you. It anchored you internally so external chaos no longer defines you. You also learned patience, not passive waiting, but active endurance. The kind that keeps you faithful even when outcomes are unclear. That patience is not weakness. It is proof of maturity. Immature strength rushes. Mature strength remains. The ancient words recorded in the first letter of Peter, chapter 1, verse 7. Speak directly to what you endured, though tested by fire. Your faith of greater worth than gold may be proved genuine and result in praise, glory, and honor. Fire proves authenticity. It exposes imitation. What survived in you is real. That is why you are different now. Quieter, clearer, less impressed by noise, more sensitive to truth. You are not hardened. You are refined. There is a difference. Refinement did not make you perfect. It made you precise. You choose words more carefully. You discern timing more wisely. You recognize when to speak and when to stay silent. This precision is the mark of someone who has learned that power without restraint is dangerous. You carry scars, but they are not open wounds. They are sealed testimonies. They remind you where God sustained you when you could not sustain yourself. And they keep you compassionate toward others who are still in the fire. You do not judge them. You understand them. Fire also corrected your motives. You no longer seek recognition the same way. You no longer measure success by visibility alone. You value obedience more than outcome. This shift is crucial. Those who chase platforms without refinement eventually collapse under them. You were spared that fate. Now, when pressure rises, you do not panic. You breathe. You listen. You respond instead of react. This is evidence of authority. Authority is calm under weight. It does not flinch at resistance. It does not need to prove itself. You may not see the crown yet, but it exists. Crowns are not handed out in comfort. They are earned through endurance. And endurance has already marked you. The fire did not consume you. It crowned you quietly, internally, with credibility that cannot be faked. What comes next will require exactly what the fire produced. You will be trusted with responsibility that would have crushed an earlier version of you. You will recognize why the process could not be shortened. You will see that nothing was wasted. You are no longer who you were, and that is not loss. That is readiness. You have reached the point where looking back no longer explains you. The past can inform you, but it cannot define you anymore. Something has shifted, not suddenly, not loudly, but irreversibly. The promise that once felt distant is breathing again, not as fantasy, but as direction. You are no longer surviving on hope alone. You are standing on readiness. This is where many misunderstand what promise truly means. Promise is not a guarantee of ease. It is an invitation into partnership. God promises presence before outcome, guidance before reward, and strength before visibility. The promise is not that the road will be smooth, but that it will be purposeful. And purpose steadies you in ways comfort never could. You are noticing new clarity, not about every detail, but about who you are and what you will no longer tolerate. Old patterns feel foreign. Old compromises feel heavy. You are not judging your past self, you are honoring growth. The promise breathes where boundaries are respected. There is also a quiet courage forming in you. Not the loud confidence that needs affirmation, but the settled courage that does not panic when unanswered questions remain. You can move forward without having every confirmation lined up. You have learned that obedience often reveals the next step only after the first is taken. The promise breathes because you stayed. You did not quit when quitting felt reasonable. You did not numb yourself when feeling deeply hurt. You did not betray your convictions to gain relief. Staying does not always look heroic. Sometimes it looks like waking up and choosing faithfulness again. Heaven records those choices. You are beginning to trust God's timing without resenting the wait. That shift matters. Resentment poisons expectation. Trust purifies it. When trust replaces striving, promise becomes lighter to carry. You stop forcing outcomes and start recognizing opportunities prepared ahead of you. This is also where responsibility increases. Promise carries stewardship. What God restores, He expects to be handled with wisdom. You will be trusted with influence not because you desire control, but because you have learned restraint. Influence without restraint destroys people. You have been trained to carry weight without needing attention. You may still feel unseen at times. Promise does not erase vulnerability, but it does anchor identity. When affirmation is delayed, you no longer collapse inward. You remember who called you. You remember why you were preserved. Memory becomes a shield. The promise breathes through your relationships now. You choose depth over noise. You value truth over flattery. You allow people to know you, not the version of you that performs best. This authenticity attracts alignment. The right connections recognize it immediately. You are also learning to bless what you are no longer part of. That is maturity. You can honor seasons without trying to relive them. You can release people without rewriting history. The promise breathes where forgiveness clears space for the future. Heaven has been patient with you, not indulgent patient. There is a difference. Patience teaches without shaming. And now, patience has produced discernment. You can sense when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen. This discernment is one of the greatest evidences that the promise is alive, as Jesus himself declared in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verse 20. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. This is the core of the promised presence. Not occasional help, not distant approval presence. You do not walk into what comes next alone. Presence steadies courage. Presence corrects course. Presence sustains when results are delayed. You are not advancing independently, you are advancing accompanied. What lies ahead will require consistency more than intensity. You do not need another emotional surge. You need steady obedience. You have already proven you can endure peaks and valleys. Now you are being invited into faithfulness over time. That is where legacy is built. You are becoming someone others can lean on not because you have answers, but because you have integrity. Integrity makes space for trust, and trust multiplies impact quietly, steadily, without spectacle. As this message has walked with you through these sections, It has not been about inspiration alone. It has been about alignment. If these words have steadied you, sharing them may steady someone else who is questioning their path in silence. Sometimes the most compassionate act is passing clarity forward. And if you have found strength in staying connected, subscribing is not about obligation, it is about continuity. Staying connected keeps you grounded in truth when noise competes for your attention. It is a way of choosing what shapes you. Liking and sharing are small gestures, but they support a larger purpose. They help messages like this reach those who are quietly searching for confirmation that God is still speaking, still guiding, still near. You are not waiting for a promise anymore. You are walking in it one deliberate step at a time. And that walk will outlast moments of doubt because it is built on presence, not pressure. The promise is still breathing because you are still willing. And that willingness is exactly what heaven responds to. You have walked a long way through these words. But this is not a conclusion, it is a pause. Not the kind that ends a story, but the kind that lets it breathe. What has been spoken does not demand anything from you. It simply rests beside you, waiting to be carried into your own life in the way only you can. You do not need to rush to understand everything. Some truths settle slowly, like seeds beneath the soil. They work quietly. They reveal themselves over time. What matters is that something has been stirred, something has been recognized, something has aligned. If these words brought clarity, let them stay with you. If they brought comfort, receive it without guilt. If they brought conviction, trust that conviction is a sign of care, not rejection. You are allowed to take what you need and leave what you are not ready for yet. There is no pressure here, no obligation, only invitation. If this message feels worth passing on, you are free to share it. If it feels meaningful to support, you may do so. And if you simply needed to listen quietly, that is enough too. The path ahead is still unfolding. You are still becoming. And what God is doing in you does not need a perfect ending, only a willing heart.